being an entrepreneur is pretty lonely.
Yep.
Being the founder of now quite a large company is super lonely. And as close as your friends and family can be, they typically won't understand a lot of the time. And
Hello and welcome to an episode of Meijor League, the podcast for aspiring entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Don Meij, and our guest today is the founder of Fitstop, Peter Hull. Fitstop was founded in 2017 and is an Australian fitness franchise that offers high-intensity training focused on functional fitness. It aims to provide a personalized experience with a combination of strength and conditioning, cardio, and recovery options. Fitstop's goal is to make fitness accessible and enjoyable for people in all fitness levels. Peter was kind enough to join me at my home to record this episode. Where did it start? Where did all these things come from?
I'll keep it a little short because I could babble on for a little bit here. But my story started as a motocross rider, motocross athlete. Make a bit of a joke around the fact that I think it taught me a lot about business. It taught me that I can hit the ground really hard and I can get back up and keep going. So resilience has been definitely a big part of being an entrepreneur, but tried to chase a dream as a professional athlete, had 2 knee reconstructions when I was 21. The surgeon at the second one told my mum I should grow up and get a real job. My parents did fund my sport, bit of an expensive sport. And so I somewhat listened to them, although I became a personal trainer. If I thought if I couldn't do it anymore, maybe I could go and teach. Maybe I could learn a little bit more about the human body and performance, and jumped in the deep end as a personal trainer, and then started to really create a personal brand out of that. From there, I got to build my personal brand around performance, just training motocross riders and BMX riders, and over time developed the brand Fitstop. So my original personal training brand, my brand was called P2P, Power to Perform. And when I was going to motocross tracks, I was actually going and helping my athletes, but I was setting up a pit stop or using fitness play, calling it the Fitstop. So motorsport, pit stop, turned it into Fitstop, and that's how the brand really started. So I did that for a few years, but then realized I wanted to be able to scale the brand. I wanted to be able to take the training methodology that I'd built that was really around human performance and training my athletes not to be better in the gym, but to be better at their sport. And I decided to open my own studio one day. I convinced my wife that my now wife, my girlfriend at the time, that she should sell her car, Toyota Corolla, fund some equipment that we imported from China. And I set up the first Fitstop back in 2013. Started with 30 members, started with the methodology and the sports science I was using for my athletes and turned it into group fitness.
And go right back to that beginning. So, I mean, that's 2013, so what have we now, 12 years of business.
Yep.
How did you come up with the knowledge? I mean, you didn't study it specifically, and yet now you're having such powerful impact on so many lives. Where does it all come from? How did you put it all together?
Look, I think I'm definitely addicted to progression.
Right.
I've got a willingness to learn and probably be coached in some ways. I think, again, growing up and trying to chase the dream as an athlete, I was quite coachable, I think anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then so as we started to really look at the business overall, originally it was just a passion play. It was, I knew I had a methodology that got great results. And when I turned that into the first studio, I knew I could get my members incredible results, training 3 or 4 times a week with me, and really sticking to this training formula, which was really the fundamentals of strength and conditioning training. But I learned probably the hard way that when you've signed a lease, you've got some debt, you've taken your wife's car, you've got a bit of responsibility, you've got to pay the bills. For the first probably 8 weeks, I only had 30 members. So I think in revenue, I think it was something like $2,000 a month. That wasn't covering the bills. I definitely wasn't contributing to the family in any way. So I actually joined a program called The Entourage, run by Jack Delosa out of Sydney. Their program was called Scalable and Saleable. And over the course of that next 6 months, I learned how to write and read a P&L. I learned the basic fundamentals of running a business. I learned how to create a marketing funnel, how to make sure I could be an attractive brand in market. And from there, I just really focused on those fundamentals of business. How was I driving leads in? How was I converting them through a sales strategy? What was I going to do to retain them? How could I build a profitable business and actually be held accountable to that month on month? And the next kind of 12 months was a bit of a steep learning curve, but we proved that the business could be profitable quite quickly. And then it just started to grow and compound. But I think my willingness to learn and be coached and have the right people around me at the right time was kind of what made us see that initial success.
And was there, those first 6 months, you're saying you're starting at $2,000, not paying the bills.
Yeah.
Were there times when you wanted to give up? Was there ever that moment when you went, oh man, this is all not right?
I think, I look back on those times and I definitely had all the side hustles, and that was probably also one of my downfalls. So although I was running the gym, the studio, and had these members on subscription, I was still going to motocross tracks and coaching.
Right.
I was still running training camps on school holidays. I started a supplement business. I was doing compression pants, selling towels and apparel. I actually even started a supplement line where I imported a sports performance drink bottled in Malaysia. I did all the things.
Yep.
And I was fortunate that some of them worked well enough to cash flow me into the next thing, but it wasn't sustainable. So one of the early things I learned in business was focus.
Yep.
Although my team probably still say I don't focus. But so many times wanted to give up. It wasn't worth it financially. It was super challenging. And when you also can't contribute back to the family, to my now wife, that was pretty challenging as well. But I think I've always had the willingness to do whatever it takes. And for me, it was about how do I take my training methodology and make a genuine impact. That was my why. I never cared about the money in the start. It would just been really fortunate that over time we've proven a really profitable business.
Yeah. And so how long were you just with one studio before you went to your second one?
2 years. So we actually, the first studio was like 100 square meter building, basically an industrial shed in the back of Redland Bay out in Brisbane Bayside. We stayed there for a year and I went from 30 members to 150 members within that time. We moved out of that space and into a retail space into Victoria Point. And that went then from 150 to 250 members within the next year. We had partnerships with Red Bull. We were doing crazy, insane parties, fitness competitions, challenges, all the things. Created a really fun lifestyle brand. And then a year after that, so 2016, we opened our second studio in Morningside.
So was there ever the time you thought it's only going to be one, this is my life, or did you have a plan? No, it's going to be a multi.
No, it was always, this is just one, until it wasn't enough.
Yep.
And I think probably more importantly, once we had got to that stage of scale in it, I wanted to be able to give others the opportunity to do the same. So, I had great trainers early on that were quite loyal to the brand and really helped grow the business, gave a lot of input into the training methodology. So I wanted to see them go from group trainers to personal trainers running their own business into managers. So once we started to see that grow, I almost worked myself out of the job. And I've done that year on year. So once we opened the second one, it was really about how could I start to scale this and what was my next challenge going to be.
So how many of the stores were your own stores before you decided to franchise?
2. So the Victoria Point and Morningside. And the real reason I franchised was we advertised for a manager. Again, I'd always kind of stretched myself very thin, almost to breaking point, probably to breaking point. I remember I was across both studios. I was managing the Morningside one, but I was still very connected to Victoria Point for the members. I lived in Newstead at the time, so it was a lot of travel. My wife worked in professional services recruitment in the city. We were a one-car family. We've always just sacrifice, reinvest. I was driving home late one night over the Story Bridge, and my car hit an oncoming car, and it smashed my my mirror.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the word, mirror.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a wake-up call for me. I was, burnt out. I wasn't focused. So I went home, told Beck, and she's like, you're an idiot. You need to stop doing this. You need to actually start to think about how you can scale and recruit. She was in recruitment, so kicked me in the bum. I went and marketed for a manager for Morningside. I met Sam Seaton, who is now the owner of it, and he came to me and said, love the model. He was a professional Ironman, had just left a role in Fitness First as a manager. He said, I don't want to just be the manager. How do I buy it? So I went and investigated how he could buy it and looked at all options, JVs, become a shareholder. What was the best way to do this? But when I really thought about what could that next stage look like for me, I was excited that he wanted to invest into the brand, but probably more importantly, he saw this as a vehicle that he could make money and make an impact. So I thought if he can see this, I talked to my manager at the time at Victoria Point, he thought the same. So I went to them and said, guys, I'm thinking about franchising. Do you want to buy the first 2? So the moment we stood up the franchise agreement, they actually bought the first 2 studios, so I no longer owned any. Silly business move because I had no revenue anymore outside of the small percentage I was taking as a royalty.
Yep.
But we took the funds that they had purchased those 2 studios, we invested that into the franchise group, and we went on our next stage of the journey.
And is it at that moment the cost of setting up franchising, was it easy, or was it something that it cost us a lot of money and we had to invest?
Yeah, we took the funds. I think it was probably around at that stage for about 200,000 that we then reinvested back into the franchise group, we'll call it.
Right.
But that capital was burnt up within kind of 6 months.
Yeah.
By the time you're paying legal fees and you're standing up trademarks and business systems, I was the only full-time employee until location number 8.
Wow.
So I did all the things. We had a lot of great people around us. It was a very much a community-driven business in a way that every business owner we brought on, we would induct them through the last Fitstop. Every owner and manager would come to the next open and teach them. We had no real systems. It was really passion-driven through a product we all believed in.
Yep.
But then as we started to grow and reinvest into the business and then eventually raise capital, we were able to bring the right people into the business and scale.
Was that at about eight Fitstops then that you... Because, you must be on just royalties. They still wouldn't have been enough to survive.
So you're selling a franchise fee, so you get the upfront revenue.
Of course, yeah.
But, for the first year, I think we had sold 8 and opened 6.
Right.
I finally convinced my wife to step into the business because I knew that I'd always surround myself with people that had been there and done it. And I guess the scary stories around franchising, once I was in it, probably too far in it to think about anything else, was... in the early stages, the business, the worst thing you could do is sell to the wrong people that expect too much and won't come on the journey with you. Don't just sell to people to get that upfront 50 grand. So I convinced Beck, who again, recruitment, professional services, very, very diligent, very detailed, that she should leave her corporate career doing very well in a pretty building in Eagle Street to come and sit on the floor with me in a shitty office and sell these things. Because I knew it was important if we protected the brand, the people coming on the way in, especially the first 50, would be okay.
Yep.
So she stepped into the business. I had an intern in the business, and then we had a bunch of externals that were working in different Fitstops that were contracting to us. So we didn't raise capital until location 20.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what gave you the courage? I mean, when I look at, as an outsider, I go to gyms, but to me, it seemed like, and I actually invested in gym at one point with one of my best mates from school. And it just felt like, I know that you've got a different model, but still there's many versions of your model too that are out there.
There is.
But I remember in the gyms that we were in was mostly equipment, and there's always somebody opening up with the next, set of equipment. It was fresh, it was new, because gyms age so quickly because of, so much activity going on. What gave you the courage? How is Fitstop one of those businesses that should be national or should be global, should even be franchised?
Yeah.
What gave you that?
Probably naivety, arrogance, confidence. I'm not sure. I didn't know enough probably to not do it then, especially the franchise component. But then if people ask all the time, would you do it again? Knowing what I know now, I'd probably do it different, sure. But I think if I always go back to that initial conversation, Sam Seaton saying, how do I buy it? And then me looking at that going, wow, in the space of 2.5, 3 years, I've created a really profitable business with a brand that people trust. And there's obviously a system around our program methodology. When I started to dive into franchising, that's the part I took really serious was how do you create a brand that can be trusted and stood out? And then how do you back it up with a proven system that's not just a one-time thing. It's, prove you follow the system, you're going to get a result. And how do we hold accountability to that? So I think for us, the secret has really been do the fundamentals really well. So I think any business and Fitstop is, or fitness in general has probably been really passion-led. And it sometimes is too much around what's the next thing and I've got better equipment or I've got this training methodology that's going to change the world. I've never reinvented the wheel. We've created a very simple system around a training program and methodology that genuinely gets results if you just follow it. And it's the same for the business. I learnt business very early on that this is my P&L. It's a simple business model. This is what I need to do to be able to make money. Follow the system and it works. Trust the process. And we've just been able to compound that year on year.
Congratulations.
Not reinventing the wheel, I think is super important, and following that up with a system that works.
And how do you build communities at scale? I mean, you're at 160 plus Fitstops now, and you're going global. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
But how do you keep the community feeling? Because I imagine when you're smaller and you've got people you're connecting with, but you're getting to a point where you're going to be opening up Fitstops you haven't even visited.
Yes, yeah.
If that's not already happened.
Yeah, look, Beck and I went to the first 70 opens.
Yeah.
It got a bit much in the end.
Yeah.
And we also knew we needed to empower and build a team that could do that as well.
Yep.
We actually just went because we loved that day. Obviously, like people are buying into your passion and brand, and Beck sold every single one of them. So to go to that day and watch the owners just, filled with joy and passion and energy, and then after it just crash and want to go home and sleep.
Yeah.
That's the exciting part. But from a community standpoint, we've really focused on making sure the macro community is the most important. So the brand's built around the training methodology, sure, and people are buying into the brand now because it's trusted and it's proven and it's all those things. And yes, it's national and international. But at a micro level, whether it's Newstead or Albany Creek or Morningside, it really comes back down to making sure that they follow the system that actually fosters that community. So our training methodology actually means that you have to connect with another human, another individual, someone you don't know potentially, especially if you're a first timer, to get through the workout. So again, building that methodology in those early stages, I wanted to be able to scale a workout that I could walk into a Fitstop and we could train together. We would meet someone else of maybe similar fitness levels and strengths. And our strength session, our lift session we call it, we'd be working at a station for 8 minutes and maybe we're only doing some bench press, some chin-ups, and we're spotting each other. You actually get time to physically connect in a Fitstop, have a conversation, push each other and get out of your comfort zone. You almost force that human connection. And so one of our big rules in our system is for a first timer walking into a Fitstop, from a trainer standpoint, we call it our perfect session. You've got 2 things to focus on. The first one is, how can I make sure that I can connect this person, this individual, with someone they can relate to in their first session? The second part is, how can I help them understand we're a fitness program, not just a workout? Because if they can feel connected to a human and also understand if they follow this program, they're going to get a result, they're going to stay with us. So there's a real big system around our community. It doesn't just happen. It's not just a fluff word. But then on top of that, when you go to an external event and everyone's wearing the brand, you now take a micro community into the macro environment and it just goes wild. Everyone wants to talk about the workouts and how they're doing and pat each other on the back. And it's pretty cool to see.
So I've seen the end results and very impressive, but is it intimidating for people when they first join?
Look, that's something we've worked on. I think fitness in general is intimidating. I think group fitness is very intimidating. I've always talked about, and it comes back down to even our fit out styles, but we want to make sure we're really inclusive as a brand. We talk about being the home of functional fitness. And for me, what that really means is home is somewhere that you feel safe and secure. Functional fitness is something that you do to get a better result for your life. So part of, again, our methodology, our marketing, and also those early touch points for someone new. And that could be a follower on Instagram, someone doing a walk-in or connected with a friend or family member. It's you can walk into Fitstop and do it at your own pace, lifting your own weights, and we will look after you. We know we've still got a lot of work to do to open this up to the wider public, but we really focus on being inclusive. And, our membership base shows that. You can walk into a Fitstop and you'll see a professional athlete. We've still got pro athletes that train with us, even Olympians, just to come and have a bit of fun. And then you've also got, the 55, 65-year-old, grandma that's training in there with her granddaughter. And it's really interesting to see. And we hope that we can keep progressing that.
And then going overseas, going to the US, I remember you and I talked, I think, about 2022, and you were talking, you hadn't even conquered all of Australia yet, and you're already dreaming big, which, is admirable, but it's also huge risk. The United States is brutally competitive. It's a large country of almost countries inside the country. And here you are. You're now off and running in the US. Tell us about that.
Look, definitely a few hurdles for sure. I remember the advice you gave me, and I'm not sure I stuck to all of it. I'm someone that also has to touch and feel it and learn it myself, and definitely made mistakes entering into the market. I think for us, the US is such a big market, and we can be a big player there, we believe. And I think for me, it's probably going back to, again, had one studio, two studios, franchise, that evolution of almost working myself out of roles. We've got such a great team in Australia. Actually just appointed a new GM, and the Australian network is in really good hands. We want to take on that next challenge and expand, but we don't want to be all things to all people. A lot of other brands I watch and follow, they'll go and sell master franchises in every country. We haven't done that. We don't want to do that. We really want to focus on owning Australia and the US, and then we will appoint some masters in some key regions. But they're the two markets that I really want to own and take our training methodology. I also think there's a huge gap in the US market from a fitness standpoint. They're very big, like big box gyms, or their group fitness boutique is very Barry's Bootcamp, Orange Theory, cardio based, or you've got your hardcore CrossFit. I think there's an amazing sweet spot for us to enter into the market, especially around social strength training, which is very on trend in the US market at the moment. So I'm excited to see what we can do in the next 12 months. But yeah, 5 studios open there. We've got our flagship Santa Monica, so that's our corporate one. It's the only one we own.
Yep.
We've got an office out of there. We've got 3 full-time team members on the ground there in HQ, and then obviously our studio.
And is it on track? How do they compare already to the Australian Fitstop from a membership or?
Yeah. It's an interesting model where, like you said, there's almost countries within the country.
Yep.
So currently we're in LA, and then we're also in Philadelphia.
Yep.
They're almost 2 very different models from a
like WA to Brisbane.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So different because rent position's very different. So when we go back and look at the P&L, what we can charge from a membership subscription versus the rent versus staffing cost, LA is a pretty complex model. We wanted to go to LA to really, I guess, go head to head with the big guys a little bit. I wanted to go and see how we could compete against the Nike Studios and the Barry's Bootcamp and a few others from a brand credibility piece. We're in a different phase of business growth. We're not at kind of that startup, scrapping the pennies together to kind of fund something. So, but yeah, it's been interesting to watch. But yeah, membership insight have been really good. Santa Monica was our corporate. We sat on that for 9 months before we opened anything else to learn from it. Made a lot of mistakes in the early stages. Probably didn't get the market position right from a membership standpoint. But now we're really excited to see it growing and doing all the right things. And
can you give me an example of a change? Because like a lot of people, having operated a business in 12 different markets around the world, is that you have to, it's not just exactly the same.
No.
There's cultural nuances that if you don't get those right, you look foreign, you look wrong, and it just doesn't make sense.
Yes, definitely.
So give us an example of something you had to change, but the Australian versus the American model.
So before we opened Santa Monica, I actually went and leased a big industrial shed over there, big warehouse, and we cut half of it out and I set up a pop-up. I signed a too lengthy lease on that one and recouped some money. But that gave me a lot of insight. So we did a pop-up, we did a full Fitstop or a mini Fitstop in there, and we started doing free sessions on a Saturday just to collect insight and information.
Yep.
We don't have digital screens in Australia, so we don't have videos around the room showing people what to do. It's very coach-led. One of the first pieces of insight we got back, though, was the American fitness community that was coming to us weren't that confident with a barbell. So we either had CrossFitters that were super confident, or we had people that had never touched a barbell in their life and come from Barry's Bootcamp, used to a treadmill, used to an instructor telling them exactly what to do. So we actually brought screens in with videos in and different coaching cues. We changed the way that we do our warm-ups and then introductions. We had to onboard our coaches very differently. We don't use a mic in Australia. We use a mic there. We brought in towel
Very
services.
Hollywood.
Yes. It's that you've got to be that hype brand, I think. And I think sometimes I think we're very authentic, I'd say, in Australia, maybe a bit too humble. And taking that culture to LA wasn't going to work. So
do you think as Australians we don't give as much compliments as somebody who's maybe being coached needs to be given in the US?
Yeah, definitely.
A lot more positive feedback.
Yes. It needs to be that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes, all of that.
My pleasure.
All of that. And that goes from, a direct team as well, where I think our culture is very, what more can we do? What's next? It's, you need to probably slow it down a little bit, but then just, turn up the hype. So we've been really able to adapt to that market. Then we were able to take that learning, launch with that database into Santa Monica. We opened really strong in Santa Monica, and it's been an amazing test ground.
Well done. And talk a bit more about the tech, because I remember when you and I first met, you were talking a bit about what you'd learned over COVID, and you'd launched an app.
Yep.
So how's that evolved? How important is it now?
Yeah, so we learnt a lot. We evolved the tech a lot. We spent a lot of money on it. We've actually just transitioned away from a full custom tech stack into a system, a third-party system, and have partnered. It's called Hapana. It's based out of Australia. So we've taken a lot of IP and what we've learned with a full custom stack, which there was a lot of complexities around that. You need very deep pockets to be able to fund the evolution of it. And it worked really well kind of through COVID and coming out of COVID. I think the tech space in general has really caught up to that innovation element. So we've actually, just rolled over from our custom tech onto their platform over December. We've done that from a scalable standpoint, from a support standpoint, but we also decided that based off our density in Australia now, we actually didn't have a marketing fund. We had a tech fund. So by changing to this third party, we were able to redirect funds back into a marketing fund. And we think that's where we're going to be able to get our better return on our business owners' money in the next 3 years anyway. So it's been a really exciting change. We still own a lot of our own IP. I still have a lot of exciting projects from human performance and wearables and data collection going on, but from a base fundamental system, it's been a really nice change to cross back over to get additional support externally and fund some really cool marketing campaigns, which is already driving a much higher lead volume into our studios.
So you already have wearables in the business?
We have a project at the moment that's going on that. What we really find is, especially in the group fitness space, wearables are so individual. You're wearing Apple. I typically will wear Apple and a Whoop. People wear Oura Ring.
My wife wears an Oura Ring.
If you're doing more running, maybe Garmin if you're triathlete. And so it's just an interesting space where aggregating some of that information, but probably most importantly, educating our members on how to use it for them. So we bring a lot more education into like our 6-week challenge or our member onboarding around if you have a bit wearable, what should you do with it? And then also, I think sometimes we can overcomplicate the data we're collecting. Really what it comes back down to is if you can create better sleep patterns, if you can drink more water, fuel your body correctly and move your body every day, you're going to be better off. We're not all high-performance athletes that need every piece of data. So it's just we're focused on being a brand that can be quite sustainable in business, and we can, again, lower that barrier of intimidation that anyone can come to Fitstop if you're choosing to get fit and progress your life.
And what about AI? Has it got a place in your business already? And if so, what does it do?
Yeah, it does. I think more so from a systems function standpoint. So a lot more to do with what we're doing in head office, especially now with kind of moving to a third-party tech system. We're able to start to look at some BI tools and be able to, I guess, get a bit more support internally to pull the right data and relevant data and point people in the right direction. But from a member standpoint, we're doing nothing with it right now.
Anything from marketing, using any of the platforms yet?
A little bit. Again, I think, obviously, support for copywriting and looking at latest articles and pulling, different elements of blogs and helping with research for sure. I think utilizing that to support a team is great, but we still want to keep quite a unique tone of voice throughout it all. So I think it's a huge supportive element. I think we've still got a lot to learn how to utilize it correctly for Fitstop as a brand.
And tell us about, you brought on a partner. Pros and cons of bringing on partners. I mean, there's some businesses that blows them up. Some businesses, it's what makes them successful. How's it going for you?
Yeah, so going through COVID, we actually partnered with Lift Brands. So they invested into Fitstop quite early on.
And who's Lift Brands?
So they own Snap Fitness globally. They're funded by quite a large PE firm out of New York. They're based out of the US. And one of the reasons they invested in us early was they wanted to see the roadmap. Firstly, to prove the model worked, and proving the model worked meant we had to get to 100 studios and show that it could be profitable time after time. What was the unit level economics looking like for that? And then they also wanted to have a path to getting to the US and the UK. And so it has been quite successful, I would say, because early stages, I think most importantly, it gave me confidence that, again, someone wanted to back it. They did help fund us into the US, so we raised money through them to fund out the US. And then because they're a US entity, entering into that market was a little easier. Basic things like social security numbers and setting up bank accounts and entities and LLCs and all those things definitely helped. But
Because it is so different, right? It's a
very
much more
different.
paperwork society than what you used to in Australia.
Yes.
I mean, we take for granted how simple things are here, and it's so much more complicated in the US.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of pros. Also, they're still a minority shareholder. They've got a board seat. They own 35% of the business.
Right.
There's still a lot of direction driven through the exec team, through myself. Like Beck and I are still the largest shareholders in the business. So we're still able to really kind of point and shoot where we want to go. I think the way that my analogy has been is they're kind of like the big brother that's been there and done it. And they're going to stop me from time to time from falling over, but they're still going to let me make mistakes along the way and learn how to grow. So look, they've been good to date. I guess I think it was the structure and the expectation on the way in. I don't know anything else other than that.
Yeah. And what about, let's talk about some of the math. What's a payback? Do you talk about those sort of numbers? Is the payback for a Fitstop investment?
Yeah, I think we do. But as you know, franchising is an interesting beast with what you can talk about and what you can't talk about.
Yes.
Look, I think what we really look at for someone entering in, I go back to when we started the business and I go back to my first 2 locations.
Yep.
I knew that it was very simple math on a Fitstop. It was what your break even was really dependent on your rent position. So we love our rent position to sit around 100,000 a year.
Yep.
We know that then our break even would sit at around 140 members or so. And then so if you can then build off that to go, cool, if I had 100 members over my break even, and that was always my sweet spot. And that's what I wanted for my own investment was whatever my break even is, whether it's 80 or 150, I want 100 members over that because that's my profit. And is that a business I'm willing to get up for every single day and also drive my money into?
Yeah.
And we're really seeing that come to fruition in the business. So we keep it simple. It's a subscription based. We make sure that all the work is done on the front end. Lease negotiation is very important. Your capital costs, very important. Know your break even, know what your conversion rate, lead to sale needs to be and what your retention rate is, and then just keep pushing it forward.
And you talk about how many members are now in Fitstop? Is that a number you talk about publicly?
Yep. So we've just cracked over 30,000. Something that I love talking about, again, going back to my startup story, probably doing about $2,000 a week in revenue. Network revenue, we're sitting at around 5 million a month.
Congratulations,
So that's been a really fun milestone, 60 million a year to do as a network. Members really investing into their health. That really growing kind of Australian business. That's something I'm pretty proud of. And obviously we just want to see that kind of keep tracking year on year.
Congratulations. Mentors? Do you have mentors that you've had along the way that have had a big impact?
Yeah, I do. I think, again, I'm quite practical, so I need to go and sit in front of people. I've reached out to people like yourself. Again, in those early stages, I did the Entourage. I spent $18,000 on doing that course. It was more money that I was making. But I really wanted to invest in myself. And then since then, I've been able to join a number of different programs. I'm in one at the moment. Small group in Brisbane. It's called Tech or Vistage, actually, just rebranded. Vistage.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Great group of people. It's all founder, CEO led. Certain revenue numbers you've got to hit to be in it. Stuart is the chairman of that group. Very intellectual and is able to support me more from developing my own toolkit. And they're the conversations I get to have with him is, these are the challenges I've got in the business right now. And instead of helping me solve it, he'll go back and say, well, hey, have you learnt this basic business principle? And how could you apply it to what you're going through right now? So that's definitely one I've lent into. That's new. I've only been a part of that group for 6 months. But then from a US standpoint, I'm just trying to meet as many people as I can on the ground to understand what mistakes they've made, what advice they've got for me. If they had their time again, how would they do it? So it's a pretty exciting time.
And being in the fitness business, what's your daily routine? What does it look like? I think one of the reasons people don't do fitness is because they don't have time.
Yeah, definitely.
So how do you make it all work?
Look, I noticed your cold plunge as we walked in. So I cold plunge every morning. So my routine has always been a routine. I think it's super important to have that discipline. So I wake up every morning, jump in my cold plunge. I'm not super hardcore. It's somewhere between 8 to 10 degrees. I do 3
That's
minutes.
hardcore for me, by the way. So.
I worked up. I started at 12. I wake up, I pour my glass of water, I have my vitamins sitting out, I jump in my cold plunge. I try not to look at my phone, and working with multiple time zones now.
You take your vitamins on an empty stomach?
No, I have banana.
Okay.
Yep. So have everything kind of sitting there.
Yeah.
I try to clear my head,
Yeah.
jump in the cold plunge, do my breath work, jump out, have my banana, have my vitamins, drink my water, sit there for a little bit. Typically, then I'll go in and wake Beck up and hurry her to get to the gym. We go train together most mornings.
Okay.
And it's either go to a Fitstop or go for a run. That's my routine.
Okay.
Depending what I'm training for. If I'm doing a triathlon, I'll throw a swim and a bike ride in there. But typically, I want to go train at a Fitstop, be around my community, or hit a long run and clear the head. But that's pretty much every day. I train 6 days a week, and if I'm not training, I'd at least do a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I think that's a big part of my life. You know, I'm a washed-up athlete turned personal trainer. Just because now I'm a CEO that sits behind a desk most of the time, like I still need to move my body and clear my head.
And what time do you go to bed?
I'm pretty solid with my routine. So 9:30, I'm in bed and switched off. I try not to touch my phone. Kind of before 9, I'm pushing it away just to make sure I can start to switch off. But yeah, I'm at 9:30 in bed, 5 a.m. wake up every day.
Wow. Working with your wife, that's unique, especially because you've been doing it, for now coming on to 10 years out of the 12?
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
I guess it's been interesting. I'm non-structured. She's very structured.
Yeah.
But I think, again, it goes back to as a partnership in general, and married, that you've got strengths and weaknesses that you need to learn and lean into. And although at times it's an uncomfortable conversation, she'll tell me how it is. And I'll make sure that I'm supporting her as much as I can, especially in her role. But what's been really nice about it has been we've been on the journey together. Like, being an entrepreneur is pretty lonely.
Yep.
Being the founder of now quite a large company is super lonely. And as close as your friends and family can be, they typically won't understand a lot of the time. And, when you get to go home and have a bit of a vent and, lean into, some of the hardship, but then also celebrate the wins, it's been a pretty special journey. She's always my number one supporter and fan. She knows that whatever I put my mind to, I'm not going to fail at it. I'm just going to keep going. And vice versa. I know that I've got heaps of blind spots. So, she's really focused on the development side of the business, but also because she can see across the entire business, we're able to have conversations and I can ask her the questions that, like, what am I going to miss here? Or most of the time she'll just openly tell me, you're missing this, this, and this.
So do you actually have specific areas, though, that you're the boss, she's the boss? Do you have those, or are you the boss?
Yeah, I think we've always tried to make sure that we've had that structure, that I'm the CEO, that she runs her department. She's always focused on driving sales. She loves the sales component. She came from recruitment. She's savage. She talks about, the recruitment days, champagne and razor blades, and she still feels that every single day. She's selling our passion. She's, having people buy into the dream. And sometimes, it doesn't go to plan. But yeah, she's wholly and solely always focused on the sales component and leans on me to make sure that she's getting the tools she needs to get the job done. And she's savage in that world, and drives an incredible result. For me, it's really about looking at the entire business and making sure that all the cogs are spinning at all the times. And I'm able to support her in that area. And then she is able to kind of lean back on me, or again, give me a nudge where I'm not seeing some stuff. So.
And on the sales area, what about social media? How do you run it at Fitstop?
Yep.
And how do you manage all of that?
Yeah, so every location, so we've got a head account. So parent-child, I think it's called in Facebook world. Right. We also use a platform that all of our content gets uploaded into. The locations have access and it distributes directly to those physical locations. We have rules and guidelines around our content, but we also know it needs to be authentically them. The first 10 locations, we actually created unique brands for every single studio. So it was always the same logo. It was a different logo than you see today. But the name of the studio, we used different fonts. Now, that's a no-go in franchising. We stopped it because we needed brand compliance. Yeah. But there's always been an element of, Newstead needs to have its own tone and voice and look and feel and driven through the local community.
Yep.
We have guidelines and parameters. Yes, we're a franchise. We have brand elements and, sometimes our marketing team gets quite frustrated with things they're seeing, but we do really lean into being authentic and being about their community.
And the emotions behind franchising, the highs and the lows, anything you can share?
Well, I think that's the difficult part. And again, going back to, working with Beck, we're able to ride those highs and lows together a lot of the time. And a lot of the time it's just talking through maybe where some of that pain point and pressure is coming from. The lows always are going to come from some form of underperformance or misalignment of expectations. And I think sometimes it's easy to push back and go, no, it's your problem, your fault. But I think as much as we can look internally to evolve a system and take on feedback and grow, then we can get better. Obviously, the highs are incredible. You know, whether you're opening a new Fitstop and you're seeing it in a new country, or you know, and the year we launched the US, we also launched Singapore. So you know, Beck and I are flying between countries. We're coming back to Australia. Like, it is a bit of a whirlwind ride. You know, and you get to make such a big impact. But yeah, we've always taken franchising super serious and making sure they're constantly evolving.
And how many units in Singapore now?
We've got 4 in Singapore, so against that startup phase, but we're excited to see it grow. It's a crazy culture. The fitness culture there is insane.
What makes just why is it crazy?
I think everyone's so excited.
Yeah.
I think the density there is wild and something that I just didn't understand. But to see how excitable the Singaporeans get around group fitness and events, there's a lot to lean into there.
So what do you think sets you apart as an entrepreneur?
I think any entrepreneur, if you've got an idea, a dream, or you think you can solve a problem and you're willing to do whatever it takes to facilitate that, then you're probably different to a lot. I think it's that if you're willing to do whatever it takes part. And that's something that I'm pretty proud of. It's that never give up attitude, and probably ties back into our business values now: relentless, resilient, and selfless. And we've tokened them. You'll see them on the wall in Fitstop. So stop at nothing, embrace the sweat, and unstoppable together means relentless, resilient, and selfless. And I think that's something that's been the fundamentals of Fitstop from the very start. I think it's quite a nice token of franchising in general as well. But yeah, I think just not giving up ever is something that I think I like pain, I like progress, I like all the things that come with the journey.
When I've met all the founders I always meet, it seems that that's a key part, is that passion and that never give up. For anybody who gets to scale, because there's so many highs and lows, how do you keep your passion up?
I think I still live and breathe it every day. I know when I'm starting to kind of drop off a little bit, it's probably because I'm not in tune with Fitstop enough. I noticed when I was traveling a lot, early stages of the US, I couldn't train in a Fitstop. I couldn't be around a community. When I'm back home and I'm training in my local Morningside, I'm around my friends. Like, I genuinely go there. I've met a great group of people there. I get to train with people I know every morning. I get to experience the community for myself. And that just reminds me that what we've built is so powerful. It's more than just a workout. So I think the more I lean into that, I'm on. The more I'm away from it, I think I lose the feel, the emotion behind it.
And I think, what I'm hearing from you is what I think for an entrepreneur is great advice, is that Fitstop is you.
Yeah.
The community is because it's what you wanted. It's what inspires you. So if it inspires you, it's probably inspired others, and that's what you've created. Yeah,
and I think again we're in the fitness space. It's incredible. It gives back so much, and if our business owners can make money along the way, and we can create amazing careers for trainers and managers, then why not do it? Don, you talked about my next chapter, launching into the US. We've got Asia. We've got all these new markets and exciting times. What's your top 3 pieces of advice back to me for this next phase?
Yeah, I think first thing is travel as an entrepreneur. So drop anything Australian. And I say that, I'm a very proud Australian, but whether you're British, American, Japanese, and you go to a new market, travel with your entrepreneurial principles. Because in all honesty, most people, when they're going to relate to it, especially franchise partners, they're going to relate to when you're giving an entrepreneurial model rather than saying in Australia, and they're looking around saying, mate, it's in New York. So I think that's a really important one. I think having the different radar up, knowing ultimately what is Fitstop and trying to harness it, but also what is some differences about the cultures. So, I'm married to an American lady, and we use the word different a lot. Because if we're trying to argue if Australia's great or America's great, ultimately they're two great nations. And we just use the word different when we come to a disagreement about certain Australian principles, American principles, because they are two great nations, and but they have very different philosophies at how they go about things. And I think, that the work hard is that you're still at the coalface, you're with your brand, you're in your brand. Don't ever get too big where you lose that touch. That's a really hard thing to do, because as you grow, without a doubt, you're going to bring people in, and their natural instinct will be say, we've got to do this because we're now big. I disagree. I think you got to go as long as you can with the smallest team you possibly can without smothering the business, because one of the big mistakes can be you also don't have the skill set. And I can say that in my business experience, sometimes we did grow so fast, and then we got to a certain point and we went, oh, we don't have enough talent to continue to grow at the pace we've been growing. And you have to have a bit of a catch-up period. So it's this balance of how do you have that small culture mentality? I remember I was a big fan of Steve Jobs, and talk about the really small team at the top. And in my philosophy, you've got to have a great CFO, a great legal and so on. But in a food industry, you need a really top-notch CEO in a market, CMO, and COO. Yeah. If you get that triangle together, those three people can do extraordinary things, and it's three people.
Yeah.
Now, they're going to work with larger teams. I mean, the United States is so big. Australia's a big place, right, for geography and so on. But, keep it as nimble and as small as you can at the top for as long as you can, and stay in contact. Yeah. One of the reasons we're doing this podcast is to inspire young entrepreneurs. It's the risk-taking, it's the journey, the courage. What are the sort of things that can go wrong? What advice would you give a young entrepreneur who's watching this right now and just trying to make that decision? Do I stay in a job or do I actually take the punt?
I think don't get caught up in social media. It's such an amazing tool, but it can give you this false sense of what's possible and how quickly you can get there. And maybe you can get there a lot faster than I've done it. But you've got to be really passionate about the problem you're trying to solve. And if you bring that passion into it, then you'll be able to drive through the tougher times. Don't do it for money. Start with passion and then build an incredible business that you can be proud of.
Great advice. Look, thank you, Peter. It's been amazing to watch your journey. It seems like you're really accelerating, and things are just going to get really significant from here. So congratulations, and thank you for coming on our podcast.
Thanks for having me.